Hello, welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat on Civic Space TV. I am Philip Muliisa. Today we discuss the President's return of the Appropriation Bill 2024 to Parliament, following, of course, earlier the passing of the budget, that is mid-May, and then the presentation of the budget by the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Matia Kasaija, to Parliament and to the general public. But later, on the 22nd, we receive a letter, or Parliament receives a letter, saying the President is declining to assent to the bill for reasons he gave. Among them was misappropriation or reallocation of funds meant for what he called the core sectors of the economy, and he says MPs shifted these monies to areas the government was not looking at as priorities at the time, but also talking sabotage and corruption. But also later in the show shall discuss briefly how the Kenyan government and the President are responding to the protests and demonstrations of the Generation Z in that particular country. Now, joining on that conversation is from the National Resistance Movement, the Director External Affairs, Major Awich Pollar. Major, good afternoon and most welcome.
Thank you, Phillips. Good afternoon and greetings to our viewers. The greetings is from the mighty NRM.
You're most welcome, the mighty NRM.
Mighty by power or by what?
Next
Popular
to
support.
yeah, they have 18 million.
By hook and crook. All the
So they have all the voters.
all the adults.
Thank you. Next to Major, which is from the Uganda People's Congress, an international media personality, the Honorable Othieno Joseph. Honorable, good afternoon and you're most welcome.
Good afternoon and greetings from the Congress of the Ugandan peoples and the peoples of the globe.
Thank you, Honorable Othieno. Just next to me is from Kyambogo University, the head of the Department of History and Political Science, Dr. Ojambo Robert. Doctor, good afternoon and you're most welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, it is my pleasure to be here.
And last but not least is from the Center for Constitutional Governance, but also the chairperson-elect of the Global Network for Domestic Election Monitors, Dr. Sarah Bireete. Doctor, congratulations on that election and you're most welcome to the show.
Thank you and good afternoon, viewers.
So you are going to head the elections in the globe?
Now I will head the election, domestic election observers and monitors. The Global Network for Domestic Election Monitors is a network of all domestic or citizens observer movements in Africa, Europe, Asia, Latin and North America, plus Middle East.
The globe.
Yes.
Wow.
How does NRM benefit from?
Congratulations.
NRM will benefit from more professional citizen election observation as a participant in elections. That will also benefit UPC, it will benefit all citizens, it will benefit academia, it will benefit everybody. Our work mainly is governed by the global principles for professional domestic observation. And we have values that govern our work. The value of non-bias or impartiality, inclusivity, objectivity, professionalism in the observation of elections, as well as a range of principles on how we should do our work. But most critical needs of domestic election observation have an element to do with the shrinking political context, where you find domestic election observers are now caught up in a situation that needs safety. An example is in Uganda, where 28 election observers and data clerks were arrested in the last elections while doing their work. Last year, the UN recognized citizen election observers as human rights defenders. And my biggest agenda will be to enjoin all global human rights defender networks to have a memorandum of understanding in the protection of domestic election observers globally.
Thank you.
No, sir, I really want to thank you and congratulate you. But to add that, it's good news for me and for NRM because over a long period of time, we would imagine that election observers are from superior countries. And when they come from a position of superiority. I said, but these are elections. Our people can actually tell us where we are wrong. And we have to agree to the rule of the game that when Sarah, who is a local observer, says we are wrong here, we admit it. I don't know if we are invited to their superior people election. When you're invited the other side, you're invited to learn how things are done better. When we go there, we are invited to learn. But when they come here, they come from a position of superiority. These things, it is our matter, it is our democracy, it is our things. We can see it, we can do it. And I promise you'll have all the protection.
Thank you for the protection. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask Dr. Sarah, given that mandate you have now, how do you see, for example, we're heading to an election, there's an election in Rwanda in a few weeks from now, there is another one anticipated in Southern Sudan and a couple of other countries. How do you see your work and your activity relating to the incumbent governments in these countries and in the end impacting the progress of democracy in these countries?
Yeah, maybe I will add that I also double as chairperson for East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network, the EHOL. Just before coming here, I was discussing with our secretariat in Nairobi constituting a mission for observing elections in Rwanda. You know, there's usually a misunderstanding by incumbents or authoritarian regimes on the role of domestic or citizen election observers network. Like Afanda which has said, most of these people prefer a different color. They have, you know, privileged treatment of a different color, and this is an African problem. A different color, then you treat them better. If you look at the elections we had here in Uganda in 2021, they were only observed by African continent networks, COMESA, you know, I think Commonwealth had, it was the only network. The European Union and the US pulled out. So you see a head of Commonwealth is given more attention than a head of ES observer mission. A head of European Union, they are given more attention, but although they are misleading that so-called privilege, then they are taken to areas that are safer and cleaner, where they plan to do dirty work and then they shield them. But citizens, election observers are everywhere because they are part of the community. And you find then that's what causes, because the regimes can't control. Whereas they can mislead the Commonwealth and take them, you know, in a cosmetic free and fair areas. The citizen is everywhere. So when they shut down internet, for example, what caused the arrest of our colleagues, when the regime shut down internet, we decided to use SMS and calls to get information on the opening of polls. When we released the first report, that was very accurate. The regime never expected us to have that information. And that's why they came to Siege Africana, where we had set up our data center. And we had them talking. How did these people get this information? Do they have satellite? Do they have embassy internet? Because of firewall protection, embassy internet is not brought down. So that's the reason that sparked of arrest. So when you have, but this treatment, if it was an EU delegation that had released that report, such questions would not arise. So this is what seems to be causing collusion and collision, where domestic election observers are concerned, and we call upon regimes globally to respect citizens' election observers and accord them the respect that has been granted by the UN.
Thank you so much.
And
yes.
And if I may say so, really, a massive job Sarah has, and it's a massive privilege. for our peoples and indeed also our country in a very particular way that we can generate citizens who are able to go onto global platforms and then gain the confidence of different structures and organizations, including grassroots organizations, and to be able to lead and then participate actively and then to lead in this sense. But I also want to say that I think it's an important point Sarah has mentioned. The fact that African regimes, see domestic election observer organizations, just like they look at domestic charities, domestic companies, political oppositions, or indeed perhaps domestic professors with a view to issues of education in grassroots Busoga, that it cannot be Ojambo and that some other person of a particular identity or name coming from another continent. So that's a very important point. Now, Sarah, I hope and we pray and we will support you in this, that you grow this network, you grow this organization, and also you grow this relation with the domestic African governments particularly, and also grow the idea into the mindset of the citizenry that there is nothing possibly much more closer to citizenry participation than this when it comes to issues of elections. So in another way, it's a part of really rebuilding our election and democratic values on the continent. But if I may say so, also that very briefly, that it happens ironically. I don't know what the visionary leaders of the UPC, particularly at the time, although it was the UNLF elections, that apparently in 1979-8 during those elections, the first time the Commonwealth observers were invited, to an African country to observe elections was actually in our 1980 generation. I don't know, it turns out to be an election which people considered quite controversial. But as I understand it, Commonwealth observer reports say that they got unfettered access to the information that they wanted. In any case, obviously, these were generally still new experiences, new fields, but they gained unfettered access. But the point Sarah is making is that, look, when these things are happening, observers should be able to have the freedom and the right to go to whatever areas of the countries and gain access to whatever information. And if they don't, the citizens should also be marking those as benchmarks for elections and democracy.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ojambo, as we see these organizations growing on the continent and globally, do you see them now impacting the improvement in the way we respect our democracies and, in the end, good governance in some of these countries?
Yeah, thank you so much, and Sarah, congratulations for this huge responsibility. You see, in Africa, normally we imagine that when somebody has gotten a responsibility like this, we have fallen in things. And that's where we get problems. But for me, I think it's a huge responsibility that will require a lot of work, a lot of thinking, a lot of involvement, and we want to say that we shall support you.
Thank you.
The other issue is that elections are a very big thing in our life in Africa. Because for us who are students of history, we have seen that many of the African conflicts have begun as a result of an election. Be it local, national, or something related to that, but an election. So the way elections have been managed in Africa has not been good, and it has produced rebel groups, it has produced a lot of turmoil. Some people may think that it is the finance bill that have led a conflict in Kenya right now. No, that is a carry forward of the 2022 election, where people got out of elections and they were not very satisfied. The person who won with a very small margin in a contestable election, which went to court, and court somehow also mismanaged the whole process and gave ridiculous rulings. And therefore people went home with some anger, and it is this anger that is emerging right now, causing a lot of problems. So we think that with the coming up of these organizations, and as the members have said, now domesticating this activity to our own people, Africans themselves, probably may yield more results than getting just a report by the Commonwealth group, which has a majority of Indians and other people who are coming here to talk about. First of all, they arrive in the country and the whole country is just strange to them. and therefore they are even worried about their security, so they are taken to only places where they feel they are secure. And they propose to them, can we also find something which is happening in Karamoja? They say, but Karamoja, the way we read, is not a nice place. So in my view, I think this is a good idea. We just need to harness it. We need to work with it. But what I would encourage Sarah is the end result of this process. It should not only be a form of sanitizing, because for me, if I'm to write a paper right now, until you do a lot of work, these observer missions and groups have been mainly sanitizers to try to sanitize. Because I've not read your reports, your particular reports, but I've read the Commonwealth report that you are talking about. I've read many other reports that come out of elections. And sometimes they are speaking the opposite of what has been on the ground. For example, in our neighbor country here, there were a lot of problems when the last election they had. You can imagine the contestant, the one who was contesting with the incumbent, was in prison. And the observers said that the elections were fair. And how can elections be fair when somebody is contesting an election from prison? I don't think that can be possible. So I really feel that we need to be to mind what is the product of this observing. Does it help to improve things for the next election? So and the beauty is that Sarah is not only an observer, she's a communicator, she's an activist, and we really hope that this will push change of policy so that after an election you can help us to know our weaknesses and we improve. And the government should accept that certain elections are normally embarrassing, because even the president last time was very embarrassed with the election that took place in Bukedea. And he mentioned it clearly. So he would be happy to see suggestions to change such things.
Thank you so much, and indeed congratulations to you, and we hope to see and observe and benefit from the work you're going to do at that level. Now, colleagues, we head back to the conversation we're to have today about the appropriation bill, and I should start with you, the observer. When government
Pandas on the spot.
talk to us about this appropriation bill that the president refused to assent to, sent it back to Parliament, had monies shifted from certain places to other places, and we've seen members of Parliament complaining, we've seen ministers complaining, the president is complaining. What is happening about this bill?
Well, the president on 22nd June returned the appropriation bill to Parliament for reconsideration in a very strong-worded letter where he accused Parliament
The blue letter.
of corruption, of corruption and sabotage in several paragraphs. He did indicate that for the past 4 financial years, Parliament has diverted a total of 3.1 trillion and upsetting the priorities of government. But for this particular financial year, which started on 1st July, and he is yet to sign the appropriation bill, he did indicate that he wants a total of 750.47 billion restored to their original proposed allocation. And the areas under this included 300 billion for local, and that takes the biggest chunk of the money that annoyed the president. Also under that, 8 billion is supposed to go back to local government for seminars and workshops. Those are the two, elements that really disturbed my thinking as priorities that should cause a halt in the constitutional making process. Parliament, the budget cycle starts every September of the year to the next May in the next year. in preparation for the new financial year. So after the first quarter, you have every user department realigning their priorities for the next budget. These priorities are what compose the first budget estimate in the budget framework paper that must be tabled before the end of December. The budget framework paper then starts the appropriation process, where you put figures to priorities of the user departments of government. And that process leads to about March, where we have Parliament reviewing policy statements and sector budgets for each of their committees. Through these interfaces, most ministers have been telling MPs how what they consider as priorities remain underfunded. And this process has then led to MPs, sometimes rightly or wrongly, shifting monies from one item to another. What stood out in the outgoing financial year, government had allocated zero budget for the Coffee Development Authority. Coffee remains our number 2 export now after gold, but usually it's number 1. Export, foreign exchange earner as a country. And you allocate the agency that promotes the growing and promotion of coffee, zero money in a financial year. In the last financial year, budget did move 300 billion and give it to Coffee Development Authority, given the standing and forex income that comes from coffee exports. So that's just an indicator of how do we come up with what we consider as priorities as a country. So when Parliament finishes a review of budgets through sector committees, the budgets go to the budget committee, where the Minister of Finance interfaces with the committee of budget before it comes to the whole house. In the whole house, the budget, or both the budget and the appropriation bill, because they are 2 documents, like any other bill, is read 2 times before passing on the 3rd reading. So when the appropriation bill is read the first time, then it's referred to the committee. Then it comes and it's read the second time, before it moves for final reading and vote. The government representatives are in attendance, and they concede. So the whole Parliament moves together, and the bill is moved by government. So if government is in agreement, why do you move a bill? Table a motion for second reading if you don't agree with the report of the committee. And why do you table it for a vote if you don't agree with the changes that have been made? So, whereas Articles 155 and 156 of the Constitution provide that the President, as a substantial Minister of Finance, will initiate estimates for the approval of Parliament for a new financial year. And then Article 156 provides for the appropriation bill, which is passed like any other bill of Parliament, except for the appropriation bill. The public participation component is taken over by MPs as people's representatives. So you don't have citizens appearing before committee like it is mandatory for all the other bills that Parliament makes. What is then the role of MPs if they cannot suggest changes? And if they suggest changes and they are disagreed with, because Parliament has 3 functions: lawmaking, appropriation, and oversight. So is this appropriation duty a rubber stamp
that Parliament should just endorse what is proposed by executive. If laws are amended through committee stage and the whole house, what is special about the appropriation bill, which is also a law and an act of Parliament after the president has ascended to it?
Wow.
Yeah, so those are the legal questions in this whole hullabaloo of accusations and co-accusations between the executive and the legislature. But finally, as I conclude, so the president under Article 91 of the Constitution has powers if he disagrees with any bill of Parliament, including the appropriation bill, to return the bill within 30 days and with reasons why he is deferring his signature on such a bill. And if the bill is passed in the same way by Parliament, if Parliament fails to agree with the president, then the president just has one chance. Because once Parliament passes a law the second time, whether the president signs or not, it automatically becomes law. He can't return a bill twice. So finally, the final approval of an appropriation bill or any other bill remains Parliament. So when the president says if Parliament tampers with the law, it amounts to sabotage, I want first to underscore two issues. That under Article 93 of the Constitution, it's only the executive that can levy a cost on the consolidated fund. And that's why the executive initiates the budget. Or if a private member moves a bill, then you have to get a no objection or that certificate from Ministry of Finance, whether the bill has a levy on the consolidated fund or not. So when the president says it's them to propose changes, in a way it's true, but it doesn't mean that Parliament, under its duty of appropriation, cannot then propose amendments. Although the amendments have to remain somehow linked to, and that's why there are stages of consensus. First reading, second reading, and the vote. So that's the consensus process. So the MPs had allocated the money to key sectors, including ambulances, including in 89 hospitals, ambulances and their fuel, including a completion of 39 health centers, among other things. This money has been taken and given to Ruto as a key priority against the health of the people. Does it really make sense?
Wow. Thank you so much. Dr. Ojambo, when you listen to these things, taking money, like she said in conclusion, from, for example, Ministry of Health, health centers, there's money that was taken from completion of schools, and so many other things, and why it was taken. Research, local construction company, workshops in the local government ministry, and so on. What is the president communicating in this instant by putting money in these places?
Yeah, you see, the biggest problem in Uganda and Africa in general is what I've been calling here the disease of presidentialism. Having countries with the presidents is not a problem. But the biggest problem is that the presidents in Africa think that they own these countries. Once they are voted into power, they become now owners. And that's why they have statements, my money, my government, my people. We become now like we are products of that country. Remember, the president is only given a job by a vote, which we did in 2021, to manage for us our resources. Number one, you need to note that this money is our money. And many Ugandans don't know this. The money is ours. It's for us. But the president, now we start celebrating that, you see, the president has given us some money, has given us some money, has given us these resources. How can he give us our money? He's supposed only to manage it. The last 5 years, I have been in deep pain because I've been in this process of budgeting. I work in some institution where I am a member of the finance committee of the governing council, and therefore every year since 2016, I have been looking through these budgets every time they are budgeted. Sarah, the budgeting process in Uganda right now is ceremonial.
Yeah,
It's a ceremony.
I agree.
The money is allocated in State House, and the associates who are there. I can give you examples. That I was not shocked when Mr. Gobi, became the Secretary to the Treasury and Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance and Planning. In all meetings prior to that time, we would be invited to the ministry. When Muhakanizi was the Permanent Secretary, and you'd see Gobi there, and you would see this other lecturer from Makerere, Muhumuza. One time, sometimes the minister would give powers to the PST to chair. So PST asked, who are you? And the man stood up and said that he represents Salim Saleh. And everybody was saying, Salim Saleh represents which MDI? He said he's the leader of Operation Wealth Creation. So they would make a lot of things, and I can tell you the budget 2023-24, with the recommendation of 2022-23, with the recommendation of the Gobis and Salim Saleh, all MDI's budget were cut by 20%. 20% across, so whether you have budgeted what. Now, to take you at the beginning, the budgeting process in Uganda is activity-based. You must have activities, and these activities are given per MDAs and ministries. So there is always a budget call, number one. And that budget call indicates the priority areas of the state, basing on what and what. And it produces what they call ministerial papers, because you depend on the budget call and you come up with the ministerial paper. So if you are like me, who comes from Ministry of Education and the university, it is Ministry of Education and Sports, which will come up with a ministerial statement all together. And those are put together, and they produce a document that Sarah was talking about, which is presented to Parliament in the first instance. Now, that's supposed to be the picture of the planning of finances for that fiscal year. In this case, we are talking about 2024-25. And that is supposed to be informed by the plans, activities, and therefore those activities are prioritized depending on the country's priority. They normally come with every year there is a slogan, I call it so, but for them they call it a theme. There must be a theme on which you want to go or to develop that year. Unfortunately, all this is done by the technical people and the public. The public, you know, people are supposed to be asked. They give their wishes, and those wishes are threaded down to come up with what I have just explained. Unfortunately, what is presented in the first framework paper does not normally become the budget of Uganda. And in my view, the lawyers here will tell me which is a problem. The Parliament and members of Parliament are supposed to tie that and say, this is what we are going to work in. Because the members of the Parliament, as Sarah was arguing elsewhere, I was listening to her, so I want to quote her so that she does not accuse me of plagiarism.
No worries.
They are representing us, the people. Because not all of us can go. In other words, we should go and sit somewhere, all of us, 45 million, and we say, this is what we want. This is what we want our leader to do for us, but that's not possible. That's why in our constitution we said we shall have representatives, and those representatives are given the power to appropriate on our behalf. So each MP goes there and says, no, I think now the biggest problem with Kampala is potholes. Let's deal with potholes. And that informs the budget. Now, unfortunately, it seems that process is followed, but the leaders, the politicians, do not believe in it. And this year was unique. You would see this Musasisi. You know, Minister of Finance is very interesting. Minister of Finance has very old Minister of Planning, of Finance and Planning, and a very young fellow. And this man was the one struggling with MPs. And I would see him not doing economics. But I think, I don't know, they need to get a new name. Today he comes with these figures, and sometimes he would even embarrass the people that he brings wrong figures. They don't match. Many times he was sent away to go away with his things to go and correct, where things are not adding up. And that has led us to a very unique budget. The budget we are going to run this year is very, very unique, because if you look at the framework paper and what we approved as a budget, the difference is 14 trillion, 14 point something trillion. And that is not little money. It's almost half of what we are going to collect. So by and large, I see a major problem in our budgeting system, where the Ministry of Finance are using the political way out the politicians are confusing the members in Ministry of Finance, and the Minister of Finance is using that as an opportunity to also put in a little money which they can use for their own benefit. And that's why you see that there is a very big conflict between the MPs and the Ministry of Finance, because Ministry of Finance is putting some money for research, 10 billion for this. When they are asked, which research are you going to do? When we have National Planning Authority, they say some research to inform the planning and what have you. It's not clear. No plans of activity, no detailed budgets and so on, but they're just saying 10 billion. So these guys remove that money and they put it on their tractors, their hospitals, their things which they have also, which is also wrong in my view. So at the end of the day, you have a disorganized budget. I told you here one time that during the course of this budget process, the president has been summoning different people in State House, including the Speaker, the Chief Justice, and the other people. And each time they go there, they are tampering with an area. For example, for the first time, they intimidated the members of Parliament. And as I've told you, the members of Parliament are also using this opportunity so that they can put their tractor, their school. So they leave such things to go so that they measure. So finally, what I am saying is that the president is the substantive Minister of Finance, and therefore should come up with a budget which should be appropriated and approved by Parliament, by law, and we should not be seeing these contradictions. Just as I finish, remember in that budget we have two major laws. We have the Appropriation Bill and the Tax Amendment Bill. Nobody is talking about the Tax Amendment Bill. In my view, if the president was really speaking for the people, the one which was very, very unfair, because here we are talking about 730 billion, which is bringing conflict. It's not even 10% of the budget. But the taxes that they have introduced, some of them are ridiculous. And some people don't know. The other day I was laughing at my colleague, economist professor. He does not know that from this year, they are going to tax him more than 50%. 50% is pay as you earn, as it was amended.
He hadn't known yet.
He didn't know. He didn't know. This is the type of economy that we have. So why didn't the president have any problem with the tax amendment bill? because he has only a problem with the appropriation bill. But the most dangerous, for me, the citizens should be worried more about the tax amendment bill. And I know majority of the Ugandan citizens, including the MPs, do not know the implication of the tax amendment bill, where 5 bills were approved, and I know those ones the president would have signed them even without reading. So I really feel that there is still a big problem in budgeting
Thank
in
you.
Uganda.
I want to bring in Major Awich. Major, how can it be that members of your party and by extension government are part of a process for 9 months, like Dr. Sarah told us?
Yes.
And 2 days to the end of this process, they seem not aware of what is happening. They seem not in agreement, and they call for a change in everything, including the president.
The answer is simple. It's just because there in Parliament, it's negotiation, agreements and disagreements, or can even be an oversight on the side of government or the members of Parliament who support the motion, not to have seen what the president will see. That is why even in all laws, it would be the same, that we have a clear majority. How comes this bill was sent to the president and there are contentious provisions that it doesn't agree with? It's the same thing. So you'd say, let's say a bill is presented for, let's say, anti-homosexuality. I think there are even provisions the president didn't agree with.
Yeah, he returned it.
He returned it, or anti-homosexuality, he returned it. The point there is a general debate. People are debating, people are agreeing. Sometimes a representative of the executive, who are the minister, like the minister who tables the bill, he may have tabled, but overpowered. And even the overpower can be lack of support from the majority, which is government, or even the majority can see and somebody does it anyway. That is why in the process of legislation, there is that stage for the president to see, because this is expected. If it wasn't expected, then the law would be passed there and then on the floor of Parliament. So it is easy to understand. But I like to say this. Maybe my colleagues have said it, but I wanted to bring in the brief facts of the contention that is in place. That the brief facts of this thing is that the bill, there was 750 billion shillings, which was put by government in this budget. Now the committee in the sectoral areas, in one area, you know, in Parliament they group into areas. For example, you can find a committee handling
Education.
judiciary, legislative, which includes judiciary, electoral commission, human rights commission. They are clustered together. So that committee, there's one committee which shifted the part of half of the 750 from where government had put it to somewhere else. Then the other 350, divide the 750 into half, was in the Committee of Budget. Committee of Budget also saw it fit to move from where government had put it to where they thought was best. Now the point here is, and I had worried that some people may seek a constitutional interpretation. If the Constitution says Parliament will approve or shall approve, what does it mean? Take the case of ministers, when they said Parliament will approve ministers. Does it mean if you propose a which Minister of Defense, Parliament will say take him to education or something? It's the same thing like this one.
But there are ministers who have been rejected.
Yes, does it mean therefore, in this case,
Sebagar.
and that's why I'm saying it needs interpretation. But in the eyes of the executive headed by the president, in his views, he's saying, it is the executive which plans, not members of Parliament. I have that mandate from the people to plan. So when I send you, the legislature, take note, one, arithmetical errors. If in a Ministry of Education, if in a Ministry of yes, I'm listing it. If in the Ministry of Education, you are talking of 3 trillion, and yet when we add that members of Parliament, it's just 2.5 trillion, then we note it. 2, if we note, maybe that is what you wanted, if we note that you have put the 3.5 billion somewhere, which in our views as a legislator, we think it is not, we note. So according to the executive, note this, send it back, but don't take it upon yourself to allocate. The executive saying, if this be the role of parliament, then for us as executive who got mandate from the people under a social contract, like we told the people in a social contract that if you vote us, we shall bring PDM. That was why the public signed a contract with us in election. Now it means therefore as government, if we put PDM, then some people in parliament will say this PDM is nonsense, remove it. Or if you set this precedent, tomorrow the members of parliament will say, you have provided salary for judges. No, give to teachers. Then the president will say, where shall we end?
As you ask that question, for us who are learning on this show, does Major tell us that appropriation means take note?
Arithmetical
Major,
errors.
what I'm saying-
I want also to ask you, Mr. Moderator, before you
Yes,
come in.
please.
So if a funder which is saying government has promises it made to people like PDM and they must fulfill, did you also make a promise to citizens that you will give their money to Ruto?
Thank you. I wanted to bring that in this way. If you say government should take note of arithmetic errors and do the corrections.
No, parliament.
Parliament.
I was listing just one of them.
Why
It was
don't we
just
then just hire accountants
So,
and
but-
auditors?
PricewaterhouseCoopers.
But
and
they are at
eliminate the
finance.
parliament?
The accountants are at finance.
Let me pay
So
for
there
it.
are three questions. I start with your question. Your first question was?
Does appropriation mean take note?
No, appropriation doesn't mean take note. Appropriation is that holistic process that will end up including the engagements, the back and forth engagement. It's not a one act. It is a process that includes that engagement, climaxing into passing the bill and then assenting to. So when you're saying the parliament per se, it climaxes into passing the bill, which will turn into act. So it is not a one-off, like you said, it is either this or this. It's a process, but climaxing into that. So it's not as you say. Your question was?
Did you promise citizens that you will give their
Did
money
we
to
promise
Ruto?
citizens? You see, the citizen, we have several agreements with the people, social contract. The social contract actually gives a steering wheel to you. Okay, you have the steering wheel. So how you bend and twist
To do
is
as you
yours.
wish.
Now, why I'm saying this is that the PDM is one of the flagship ingredients. There are many things. For example, giving money to Ruto is part of the overall
Of
leadership
PDM,
and guidance. No. Giving money to Ruto that you're saying, or even giving money to defense, or giving money in some,
No,
whatever
defense
it
is
is.
No, defense is
Whatever it
understandable.
Okay?
We are
If whatever money that you give is just part of that social agreement that gave you the steering wheel. Okay? Your question was?
Yes, Parliament should take note of the arithmetic errors in the budget, inform cabinet.
Their job
Not
is a
cabinet.
calculator.
No, not
We
cabinet.
should
I'm
just
saying
take it to
in
the
the
professors
process,
in
I
the
have already
ministry.
said the process of appropriation is not a one-off. It's a long-term engagement back and forth. So the arithmetic, I was just giving a one clear example. But I also gave shortly after arithmetic, I said, where you see priorities, in your opinion as legislators, like he said it, I've always said that 45 million can't be in a Kololo airstrip, neither can we be in a Nambole. Because there's an assembly of the nation called the National Assembly. So this National Assembly, we are there through our delegated representatives, the MPs we elect. We elect these MPs to go to that National Assembly, where not 45 million. If we had a provision where all the 45 million could assemble in Kololo or Nambole, that would be the National Assembly. So the Parliament as it is the National Assembly. So even when you're in the National Assembly, you develop automatically procedures that govern your interaction, especially where your bodies interacting like the executive and the judiciary, and the legislature per se. So, therefore, these brief facts of what is bringing us here, or what is in debate, is that allocation of 750 billion, which is now subject to interpretation as to what appropriation amounts. And as I said, I only explain in the lenses of the executive, in the lenses of the executive led by President Museveni. He is saying, I plan for the country. You are not the planners. Now, if you dictate to me the planner, then you are making the priority upside down.
Thank you.
And therefore, the final thing is, if you set this precedent, then where will you end? Tomorrow Parliament will say, no, you have put this thing wrongly. We want to put it this way. And it will be chaos.
So briefly, Major, what kind of impact can citizens, through their representatives, have on the budgeting process?
Correct.
First of all, the citizens, the process is, the budget's a long process. Like Sarah said, it starts in September and ends there. So along the way, there are many inputs by citizens. Through sectoral committees, like if there is agriculture, the farmers come and make their views. Through the ministry itself, there are also citizens, the taken contrast, they are also not foreigners. If they are foreigners there, they are few. There are budget discussions and budget seminars, budget meetings. They always call the public. Sometimes they even make it regional. They say there's a regional budget in Gulu, regional budget in Umbara. So there are several processes. Then finally, they are representatives. So in between this month, there's so many processes that the citizen can put in, either directly or through their representatives or through the technical people.
And they say we need ambulances, and the planner says that is not a priority.
Yes, that is why they are planners. Because the planners can say, for example, this year, the last financial year, we provided, say, 30 ambulances. And to the regions that we had considered by our data, the prevalence of disease and this was this. They have the statistics. So then this year, according to the emerging issues, this year's the priority is not ambulance. This year's, for example, the ROCO that they are talking about, I think the ROCO is in a relation to the construction in Parliament. You find that government is saying, no, this thing of members of Parliament not having space, where we are renting this thing of civilian.
That one is budgeted under Parliament. That one is budgeted under Parliament. Roco is giving to a company.
It's just a giveaway.
It's not, they don't even indicate what they are going to do.
It's construction of Parliament.
No, that one is budgeted under Parliament.
That one is different.
Fine then.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that
It's just a donation.
what I'm saying is
Like
that
what they gave to Kirunda, this man is called who? This man of the virus sent Magola 756 billion. It's just a donation. Take, good man, Rocco.
okay. You want
Thank you, Major.
But before Honorable Cheno come, let me just correct the impression that Major has created. According to our constitution, and the good thing Major is a lawyer, the president is not absolute. We have what we call shared democracy. And in this shared democracy, each entity of government has its role. Parliament has its role, the president has his role, the local governments have their role. In fact, it's just in Uganda that local governments now have only been made to look like queen dancers in a party. But when you check our constitution, you find that we are running what we call shared responsibility. As he says that the president has a social contract with the people as the president, MPs also have a social contract with the people as their representatives. So is LC5 and so many others. And therefore, it is wrong for the president to go and assure that you members of parliament, what you are doing is wrong. So long as they have done it within the law, he's the one who is wrong.
Yes, I just want to say this. Excuse me. About the shared responsibility, I don't want us to say, make it look like for us in NRM or government, we perpetuate dictatorship or we don't have shared responsibility. One clear case of shared responsibility is in the case of the president and parliament. Sarah has said that if a bill is taken back twice and there's no agreement, it becomes law. That is itself to show you a shared responsibility that while the president has all these powers, the parliament also has this. And that is why taking it back he refuses, taking it back he refuses. it becomes law. Isn't that a clear definition of a shared responsibility?
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, for the benefit of viewers, I want to clearly read out the duties of Parliament, and this is for parliaments globally, not just Uganda. Duties of Parliament during appropriation. Parliament has a function of review and approval. So Parliament examines the government's budget proposals often presented and which outline allocation of funds. Then debate. MPs debate the merits and implications of the proposed expenditures, scrutinizing how the allocated funds will benefit the people in line with the national priorities and public interest. Amendments. Parliament may propose amendments to the appropriation bill, suggesting changes in allocation of funds or total amount to be spent. Authorization. Once the debates and amendments are settled, Parliament votes the appropriation bill. Oversight. That is now in the post. This is the detailed function of Parliament when it comes to their duty to appropriate.
Correct.
It's not just a mathematical exercise.
You see the operative word there is propose, suggest,
Then
the goods
vote.
are there. They're
Review.
That's
Review.
why.
Review,
That-
propose. It's
That's why I mentioned
which
the
grammar can
process.
we understand from there?
You
That's
see,
why I
Major,
mentioned the
Grammatical
process.
sense is clear. Your work is to propose,
Propose,
is to suggest.
review.
Yes,
Approve.
review one.
then
Approve
vote to
and
that.
authorize.
What do they do? when
Let's
they
pick
vote?
one item.
Philip, we are interrupting with the Mr. Othieno,
No.
but the truth is, those things read like that, and you are the one who has just proposed. It is a process. Before they approve, so when they propose, it goes back to the executive. The executive makes their view.
Yes.
That's
with
why
that-
there is the first reading,
Yes.
second reading,
So once
third
they
reading.
approve that we have now approved. That's why Sarah said there must be some agreement. But in Uganda, it seems like the president had visited maybe Cuba. He comes back and says, "Hey, this one they have not done it." No. It brings confusion.
Thank you so much.
Parliament is to propose.
Honorable Cheno,
And approve
when
and
you listen to
authorize.
some of to all those that Dr. Sarah has read, but also what is happening? The president complaining, the ministers complaining, MPs are angry. Where are we? What is happening to our systems as we operate as a country?
We are not a democracy. Uganda is a one-man rule. And if there's anybody who has any doubts, check now with a good proportion of NRA legislators who have been humiliated and embarrassed by Mr. Museveni. This exposes, the system that we've been shouting upon the last 40 years. It's total sense of arrogance. In fact, like a certain legislator said 2 days ago, that this is unprecedented, and Comrade Awich is talking about precedent. It's unprecedented on the, ever in this country. But that said, interestingly, Comrade Awich is dragging the legal conversation here, Sarah. The first time this matter came up, I think we were having an informal conversation. Him and I, play golf once in a while.
Oh.
So.
We're that class of golf.
And
You are not in our class. That's why we play football.
and Comrade Awich was talking about, and he's mentioned it here, Sarah, if you didn't get it.
Yes, arithmetical errors.
No, the matters of possible constitutional interpretation. Comrade Awich is actually quite locked. I'm quite surprised he's still running with it, with the idea that the executive has the executive has got an authority, and Mr. Museveni is provided for under the law, under the constitution, and Parliament has got no business interfering with the dream and vision of Mr. Museveni. Now, that is totally erroneous, and in any case, actually, as I said, Mr. Museveni doesn't really know anything called democracy. And actually, the sense of arrogance, as said again by another member of Parliament, who's actually NRM for the last few days, obviously, off record, is the fact that no, Mr. Museveni does it as he wishes. It happens, unfortunately, for the Legislative Assembly that The timing was such that public opinion was not very much favorable to the assembly. And so Mr. Museveni thought he would play his dice and throw this thing back to these guys. But I think it should backfire, particularly if the majority of Ugandans, have access to internet and so therefore watch.
But Othieno, it will not backfire. These guys sat in one evening and approved according to what the president says.
Committee of the whole house.
Actually, what I'm saying
He
is,
surprised me.
well, I was coming to
They
that.
just saw the light.
I was
They follow darkness.
No, I was coming to that, they've done it like that. My message was really to the majority of Ugandans who are not part of this elite establishment. Maybe the young guys should learn lessons from Kenya and know how much you're being taken for a ride. Because quite clearly, nobody can answer the question of the 750 billion Uganda shillings satisfactorily. It's actually a shame on Mr. Museveni. It's actually theft. It's something that if a UPC government were elected in the next couple of years, would actually seek to have a revisit of this. Under what circumstances is it the case that Mr. Museveni decides to donate 100 billion Uganda shillings, 1 billion Uganda shillings? But in this case, it's 300 billion Uganda shillings.
I tell you what, Kyambogo University is run on a budget of 138 billion. Salaries, everything.
So those are 2 financial years for Kyambogo University.
3.
3 financial years for Kyambogo University.
And you are saying, Roko, take and enjoy yourselves.
How can you actually say Roko Construction, a private construction firm, that has the privilege of getting a contract to build Parliament, to build section, meaning they get all the Josie contracts, but their priority, not ambulances, not hospitals, not local dispensaries, not local health facilities, not emergency blood transfer from one hospital to another. When I actually told this program just a few months ago, a young child died in Nagongera because there was no blood. And by the time they sought to look for blood in Tororo and then eventually to Mbale, and by the time they transferred blood from Mbale to Nagongera, privately, the child was dead. How? So I think it surprised me that it was happening at the same time when there's this Kenya protest. But also, I think because of the mess in Parliament, surprisingly, some people initially, without details, thought that, Mr. Museveni is taking it back because he might have spotted something, from the parliamentarians. Those parliamentarians actually went ahead and got the figures wrong. I was telling a parliamentarian yesterday, a friend, that actually this time around, maybe it was Chris Oboro or whoever, they actually miscommunicated or insufficiently communicated these things to the broader public. But whatever the case, they've gone ahead and approved the whole thing anyway. The message is, and that's basically a challenge more to me from the political class, and then of course maybe even you guys in the academia, and indeed Sarah in the civil society, how much of this conversation are able to continue running with, considering the fact that we are running a heavily indebted nation state. Recent corruption experience has shown that there's a particular class of people who are literally stealing and continuing to use huge amount of our public resources when the majority of the citizens of this country are actually struggling. How we're able to sustain this, I don't know. The deal that was done, and I wanted to come back to say to that, the deal that was done and the manner in which this thing was passed tells you that actually no, it's a rubber stamp assembly generally, and that the fact that you can talk about Minister for Finance officials playing figures tells you that actually many of these MPs also play figures. It is shocking. Sarah, you and I were amongst the optimists 3 or so years ago, 2 years ago actually, when we thought that this Parliament had predominantly younger people,
You were wrong.
fresher people, and that maybe they were going to be much more energetic, much more focused, much more independent. But they seem to be worse. I think the case now in Uganda that whenever you get into a position, political or otherwise, it's the opportunity to eat, because you don't know what happens tomorrow, and then as long as Mr. Museveni is in power, nothing's going to change. It's shameful. I'm glad that this is something that could not have happened under any previous UPC administration, but I can assure Ugandans there's no circumstance under which such kind of a mess would take place under future UPC government.
Thank you so much, and it's indeed shameful. Colleagues, we head into a very short break, and the Citizens Chat Show will be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
You are still on Uganda's leading freedom platform, the Civic Space TV, and this is the Citizens Chat Show. I am Philip Muliisa. Today, we are discussing the events around the Appropriation Bill 2024, but also in this segment, we're going to talk about Kenya and the protests and the responses from the government, the president, and whatever the young people are talking in that country. And in that conversation is Major Awich Pollar, Honorable Othieno Joseph, Dr. Sarah Bireete, and Dr. Robert Ojambo. Dr. Sarah, where we are, this bill has just been passed, but not yet assented to, and we are 5 months into the new financial year.
No, 5 days.
5 days, sorry. 5 days. How are we managing government? What are we spending? Where is the money coming from?
You know, sadly, and I know it has been expressed by, Othieno and Dr. Ojambo, we don't have a budgeting culture. In Uganda, budget is ceremonial. Why do I say so? We used to have a budget act that was later merged into what we have as a Public Finance Management Act. According to the Public Finance Management Act, when a government presents a budget framework paper, Parliament is supposed to create a ceiling of how far a new budget can go. This has never been done. And as a result, you have a budget framework paper that shows a different figure. You have later a budget that is at 58.3 trillion. And when the sector committee reports are added, is at 60.3 trillion. And on the day of the passing of the budget, government presents a corrigendo of 14 trillion. That is total abuse of Uganda's budget process. But how have we found ourselves to this? Parliament does not follow the budget process as put down in law. When a final budget estimate is read, Parliament is supposed to be given 3 days of studying this budget before debate begins. This Parliament, under the Speaker, the current leadership, there is no debate on the budget. Also, the Parliament, the 11th Parliament, the 11th Parliament has weakened itself on two fronts. The first weakness of the 11th Parliament is in their rules of procedure, that you give an MP 2 minutes to debate. Even on this show, we can't submit for 2 minutes. You cannot make a sensible submission in 2 minutes. This is the same rule that carries through the budget. What the 11th Parliament should have done, in my view, is to allocate time per side of Parliament. say that the ruling party, and I'm giving just an example, a ruling party will have 30 minutes of debate. Opposition will have 25 minutes of rejoinder. Follow the numbers. Try to be proportional to the numbers, but also reasonable to each side, because we are in a multi-party dispensation. So opposition will have 25 minutes of rejoinder. Then you can say the independents will have their 15 minutes. When you do that, then the NRM will say, we are debating budget. Who are our experts? They choose 4 people and divide the 30 minutes between the 4 people. Then you will have sensible debate in Parliament. Opposition will say, who are our frontliners on budget and financial matters? They will choose their 3 or 4 people. They will respond. Then the same will apply to independents. There you can have a sensible Parliament. But what kind of debate can you have in 2 minutes? As you make your preamble, the time is up, they switch off the microphone. And then you have the speaker, shut up, like a kindergarten. So Parliament weakened itself on that front. The second front where Parliament has weakened itself is through conduct. You have a speaker who is sanctioned by 3 countries. The only speaker in the whole world with sanctions. So, her credibility now, she has only to be a punching dog, not even a punching bag. She's so weak that the executive will do whatever they want, because she knows her verdict is out there for everybody to see. She cannot push back on anything. The state in which she is today, sanctioned. So that is like having no Parliament. So when the president writes such a letter on 22nd of June, so through conduct of Parliament, they go for abnormal recess. They went for a recess after the end of the session, came back from a recess to receive State of Nation address and budget, went back in recess. Like, what nonsense! You hit the iron when the head when it's hot. They should, what was the need of this recess they are in? But we have also heard that sometimes the leaders of Parliament overdraw the funds. So when they have no money, then they declare recess. So every time and then, before we would know a recess happens, then Parliament convenes for 3 months, then there's a recess. But now you go recess, come back 1 week, go recess, come back, because they abuse the money that is meant to run Parliament, and whenever the leaders know now they have overdrawn.
So how is the recess called again now?
Do we know? The speaker declares the recess anyhow. So Parliament,
what you are saying,
yes, I've heard that, first of all, we've all witnessed that the 11th Parliament is running in a very abnormal manner. Irregular recesses. You can't even predict when Parliament will be in session. The speaker declares recess like you are buying meat for your home whenever she feels like. There is no known schedule. But we've also heard that she's doing that because they abuse the money that is meant to run Parliament. So whenever Parliament is broke, then the leaders send MPs on recess because there is no money to facilitate them to do work. Whether it is true or not, they need to tell the country why they are declaring abnormal recesses that cannot allow normal flow of Parliament work. So now why are they in recess after receiving the State of Nation address? Why? So the president sends a letter on 22nd June, but Parliament is in recess. So you recall Parliament to debate, and now they are back on recess, by the way.
The best job in town is made.
Yeah, the intervention, I thought at the beginning you had posed a question that we are these days in
She's building a background.
And then what is the status? Because if
I'm coming to that, I was giving background. Which you usually tell viewers of this show that you are more disciplined and you don't interrupt.
And more
I don't know what is happening to you today. Please stick to your principles. So when now the speaker records the budget to sit on second, it is in the new financial year. So if such a thing had happened when Parliament was not on these abnormal recesses, we wouldn't be questioning whether we are a fifth year with no appropriation bill. From 22nd, they should have addressed the matter within the old financial bill, but they were nowhere. So that's why I was bringing this background, which for your information, before you interrupted me. So you have the financial year starting on 1st, but the Parliament is nowhere. You have to record them from wherever they are. So also Parliament has weakened itself.
Can I carry out with my intervention? My intervention is when a financial year starts without the bill being turned into law, under Article 154 of the Constitution, the President can authorize spending. Simple.
How does he do it? Don't give viewers half-baked information. How does he do it?
The deal to authorize that the act is saying this year, as a country, we have passed this money for the country to spend. In the absence of that, as an emergency provision, Article 154 of the Constitution says the President can authorize spending.
How?
We spend
by telling the Minister of Finance.
No,
the
the President authorizes under 154.3. You see the way we read those to people also matter, because our people's understanding of the Constitution is raw. 154.3, the President can create a memo through consultation with Auditor General and with the approval of Parliament for any expenditure from the consolidated fund. You must have the approval of Parliament, including that emergency funding.
Anyway, my short is, I'm not going into the detail, but what I'm saying is, in the event that Parliament has not authorized the use of money, the bill is not turned into an
They can authorize an emergency.
What I can assure you is that the government will continue to run under that provision of
through
Article
Parliament
154.
also.
The President can authorize, as a President, Article 154 authorizes him. That would have been the simple. And that's why I was impatient with the Sarah's long background. I thought she was
I'm going to read that article,
in the absence of
Awich.
no act, this Article 154 will work.
No!
Major, as we respect that article and the power of the President,
I will read it.
Is he working in the premises of the previous budget, in the new budget?
The new budget.
No, they have not
new
spent.
financial year.
A budget he's not agreeing with.
The new,
No.
They said the President shall authorize the use the spending.
Mr. Moderator,
Please.
I happened to be on the show the other day with finance. According to them, nobody has spent money for the new financial year. Of course, 2-3 days is not a crisis. That's why Parliament rushed, spend a bill, and all their debates, they were saying we don't want a crisis. But I will retrieve the article in the case of that.
You see,
so that
why I
the
don't even
methodology
go
is
into
clear.
detail
The details are important. The devil is always in details.
Spending is in quarterly. You see, government spending is in quarterly. Now, before you reach the other quarter, these things would have been settled. But should it reach the quarter time for spending the quarter, if by any unfortunate luck it reaches that time of the quarter, then the President will use Article 154. But why? Because it's just a few days. All I wanted to say is that there's no cause for alarm. There's no gap in the law. The law is there saying in the absence, because your question was in the absence, what do we do? So the simple answer is, it is just with the fallback position is Article 154.
Thank you. Yes, Doctor, you want to say something?
I think both Major Awich and Sarah are correct. But what is important is that whatever Major Awich is saying, there is a process.
Yeah, there is a process.
Which now that process has not taken place. Because the President is allowed to write a memo. I am just using their own words. But Sarah is saying that that memo must be approved
I'm not aware
in
about
consultation. I was reading, by the way, a more detailed constitution. And that's why, you know, as a student, I'm not a lawyer, but I study constitutionalism. So I read the constitution so much. I was reading the Constitution of Kenya for it is elaborate, because I was wondering, how is Kenya now going to run?
Let me read the article, if you allow me. Withdraw from the consolidated fund, Article 154. Clause 1, no monies shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund except A, to meet expenditures charged on the fund by this constitution or by an act of parliament. B, when the issue of those monies has been authorized by an appropriation act, a supplementary appropriation act, or provided under clause 4 of the act. Number 2, no monies shall be withdrawn from any public fund of Uganda other than the consolidated fund unless the issue of these monies has been authorized by law. Number 3, no monies shall be withdrawn from the consolidated fund unless the withdrawal has been approved by the Auditor General and in a manner prescribed by Parliament. Number 4, if the President is satisfied that the Appropriation Act in respect of any financial year will not or has not come into operation by the beginning of that financial year, the President may, subject to the provisions of this article, authorize the use of these monies from the consolidated fund account for purposes of meeting expenditure necessary on the services of the government until the expiration of 4 months from the beginning of that financial year. So these 4, Auditor General as prescribed by Parliament.
So, but the simple thing is there is no gap, there is no
And,
stretch, there is no one.
and nobody has done that. So the point is, the President cannot just write.
Thank
There
you
is
so
a
much.
process.
Honorable Cheno, briefly as we shift to the next topic, how should the ordinary citizens in Nagongera, in Kasese, respond to such events unfolding in the country?
Are they even aware?
Ignorance.
Many of them are actually
Are
unfortunately
not
not
aware.
aware. But for those who are aware, should mobilize themselves, organize themselves, and prepare in a constitutional way to seek to ask this regime to fall at the next election. That is the only way they can do it, number one. And number two, I think the citizens of Nagongera and others should actively begin to question the role of their respective legislators in this business and these matters. And number 5, they should begin to directly be questioning anytime that Mr. Museveni goes to tell them lies about a bridge somewhere in Busiu, tell them that, well, unless you're able to qualify this, no votes for you. Thankfully, in Nagongera, we are saying that no tarmac on Nagongera to Busolwe Road, no vote for NRA at any level in the next elections. And that campaign is working on, is building up very well. I hope it's able to be built across the country. Why I've given you such a simplistic thing is that I don't think there's anything going to necessarily change, unless Mr. Museveni retires. He's hooked into these things. He's unfortunately hooked the political class into these things. And many legislators, including some legislators in the political position, unfortunately, are hooked to this thing. So it's basically a loot, and it's open corruption, and it's a corruption akin the style that Sarah once upon a time referred to the monkey's business with those ripe bananas. It is peaked at the top, and the most exemplary way is that in the last few days we saw it being perfected by Mr. Museveni using legalese, constitutional mandate, am I right? Using ROCO, a company whose track record in this country needs to be investigated. And to be investigated soon and quickly by the people of Uganda.
If I may add something brief on what Mr. Cheno has shared. In the outgoing financial year, which ended last week, government spent 3 trillion without parliamentary approval. So they raided the treasury. And even when there are provisions to seek approvals of parliament or follow procedures, if they did that in the financial year, what would stop them from carrying on as if they have an appropriation bill?
Wow. Thank you so much. And colleagues, that's the much we can talk about, the ROCO appropriation bill for now. We want to shift gears and go to Kenya, talking about the protests and the standoff between the Generation Zs and the government of Kenya in what started as an opposition to the financial bill of 2024, and later many other needs and requests came in from the people to the government, and government responding to some of these and the others saying it is impossible. But we want to assess what Kenya is at right now and how this situation can eventually come to an end peacefully and for the benefit of Kenya and the region. Dr. Ojambo, I want to start with you. Many things have happened in Kenya. As we speak today, the other day the president was saying because they can no longer go on with the bill, Kenya now is supposed to borrow to the tune of 1 trillion Kenya shillings to run government, and he says this has very negative and strong implications to the country going forward. Where are we in terms of running Kenya as the economic giant of the region?
I think what is happening in Kenya, to use the words which have been used here, is unprecedented. The Kenyan government, which was set up in 2022, had given Kenya a very good image in the world, and very many people were hoping that Kenya was starting to stagger and stand in terms of democracy is concerned. According to President Ruto, he took over government when Kenya had a debt of 1.3 trillion shillings, Kenya shillings. According to them, again, I'm quoting them, last year they had struggled in the budget 2023-24 and reduced that debt to 800 million Kenya shillings. Their projection was to reduce it to half this year using the 2024 finance bill, maybe to something like 500 billion, but still Kenya would have debts. So that means that that cannot take place, but also there are those who think that the finance bill may take root even without the approval and the assenting of the president, because according to the Kenyan constitution, if a bill is taken to the president and the president returns it, and then there is no clear process of amending or working on the bill, after 21 days the bill takes effect as if it was approved to an act. So that's why you see there is a confusion in Kenya. Some people are saying that President Ruto is just conning the Gen Zs by telling them that I've withdrawn the bill. But no process of withdrawing the bill has been used or put in place, because serious lawyers have been arguing on public and commentaries, on public media and commentaries, that Ruto has no powers to withdraw the bill. The bill was already presented in Parliament. It was approved by the House by the 3/4 majority. And therefore that bill has already been approved by Parliament. It was supposed to be assented to or not, and therefore it is following that process. The one who took the bill to Parliament is the one who is supposed to withdraw it. That is the minister concerned, through a directive from his president, and after it must follow a process. So there is a feeling that the bill may pass to an act automatically. How far that the lawyers need to handle that. But let's now go to the real issue. The issue began with the drop the finance bill, and that is what started the demonstration. After the demonstration on Thursday, the Good Thursday, the Gen Zs call it the Good Thursday, the government look at it as the Dark Thursday. The rhetoric changed, that yes, the bill is away, But now Ruto must go. And Ruto must go slogans have really confused the president. You know, I've always liked Ruto as a very courageous president who is always articulate, and by the way, is one of the most articulate presidents in Africa, especially when he's speaking English. Kiswahili has a lot of problems. So I have seen, as days go, Ruto being deflated. The other day I saw him on TV. Unlike here, Ruto still goes on TV like any other person and they debate with the TV people. So he went to Citizen, no. It is called the Spice Radio. And while he was there, the body language was showing me a man who has no idea. And therefore was just depending on so many other things. And one of his biggest thing has been KDF. KDF is the equivalent of UPDF here. So as I talk now, Nairobi is under the patronage of KDF. And the argument has been they are guarding key installations, the public places, and generally the security, which they say was in danger. They have gazetted it under Duale. Duale is the Secretary for Defense, the equivalent of Minister for Defense. And the KDF now is not using the police mechanisms. Will deal with you like an enemy. So Nairobi quietly is becoming calm. But what the Gen Zs have done is now to take the demonstrations to the rural areas. In Kenya right now, you cannot go to church. You cannot go to church as a politician and you fundraise. That church will be burnt because the Gen Zs argue that much of the money that has been stolen in Kenya is normally taken to churches, and or there was a man called Oscar Sudi who donated 20 million Kenya shillings in a church. For Ugandans, that's about 70 million shillings just at a go. And it was like pocket change, like the president normally does here in bundles of money. So the Gen Zs said, and many churches have now stopped fundraising in church. Now, the ministers, just near us here in Kitale, the minister's home was burnt to ashes in Kitale here. In Narok, the president's convoy was stoned when he was coming from church, and they were chanting the word Mwizi, Mwizi, which means a thief. In fact, people are banging his car. If it was here, there would have been casualty. You remember what happened in Arua. The people are stoning the president's convoy. And in many places, now, politicians, as I said last time, had turned burial ceremonies into campaign centers. Now the people who voted yes cannot say anything in Kenya on any burial. They cannot be allowed. So the country is in terrible confusion. The finances, they are going to manage. These third world economies do not need a budget to run their economies, because their economies are run outside the budget. The budget is just for borrowing and also putting a semblance of unorganized government. I don't think that in Kenya people are not getting their allowances and salaries. But in addition to borrowing, the president has also come up with the following. He has already made directives to reduce the salary of all public servants, including himself. And the CS for the equivalent of Mururi Mukasa here, public service, that is Moses Kuria, has already given a directive. So they are starting with the State House, they will follow Parliament, and county governments. They are going to deal with that, and they are thinking that can raise them around 300 billion shillings. So it does not solve the problem. We are still far. So they are going to borrow, but the people, the Gen Zs, are also now demanding. That's why I like the Gen Zs. They are not like the demonstrators I see in other countries. They have also suggested to Ruto what he can do to cut the budget. Number one, they are saying he should remove the benefits of the First Lady. In Kenya, the First Lady has First Lady has benefits like an office. They have salaries and allowances for both the president and the governors. You know, there are 47 governors in that place, and each of their wife is called, or their spouse, not only wife, are called First Lady. I don't know if it is a man. If it is a man, I don't know what happens.
And the deputy president.
And the deputy president.
No,
So-
you have first man, first gentleman.
I don't know whether it is also legal. Then that is one. Number two, they have argued that the salaries of MPs, emoluments, should be slashed. Kenyan MPs are one of the highly paid MPs, not only in Africa, but in the world. So they are saying their salaries are giving them kiburi. In Kiswahili, kiburi is stubbornness, that it is giving them that stubbornness to become arrogant and do all things. Then they are also proposing that a law should be put on fundraising, because they really feel that money is stolen from and that is the problem which is even in Uganda here. Money is stolen from the national coffers and taken to the churches and the other public places. They want a law on fundraising, so that and I think that law, they may not just know that it must be there. If a man moves with 70 million shillings and just goes and hands it over in public, isn't that equivalent to money laundering or something related to that? So they are proposing a number of things, but by and large, what I know, unlike other African countries, I know must be a lot of talks in Kenya, and very soon you will hear pronouncements from key politicians. And the Gen Zs had said they will not listen to these Odingas, they will not listen to anybody, but it looks like those are going to be the solution to these problems, including Kenyatta is holding a very big key to the solutions. And it looks like they are silent. They must be talking something, which very soon they will announce.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sawa, what's your assessment of the way the Kenyan government is handling this situation with the Generation Zs and indeed the other politicians that are involved?
Well, the key question is whether this is Kenya's road to Damascus. The Damascus moment of dealing with the opulence by the political class and abuse of their offices. Government of Kenya has not handled it well compared to, a developing democracy that they are. Of course, we can't use Uganda as a benchmark. So I will not even attempt that. If these demonstrations were in Uganda, many families, about 10,000 or so, would be mourning the loss of their loved ones. So that's why I'm saying I cannot even attempt to compare with our situation here, where the security forces use excessive force and where the government assumes that citizens have no right to protest. So in Kenya, the current data shows that we have 43 deaths. This is data from the Kenya Human Rights Commission as projected on the Citizen TV of Kenya. 41 deaths, 361 injuries, 627 arrests, and 32 abductions. This is very unfortunate because the 2010 Constitution of Kenya is quite elaborate and strong on fundamental rights and freedoms of the people and how government is expected to behave. So when you have police using live bullets in any country that claims to be democratic, it's a very sad situation. I want to refer to Ruto's roundtable talk, which he held with the top journalists from, I think, NTV, Kenya, Citizen TV, and another. Yes. There was a sad response by Kenya when journalists referred to the shooting of a 12-year-old that had gone to buy books for his school. Imagine pumping 8 live bullets in a small body of a 12-year child. And what was sad then was that President Ruto kept assuming that the child was alive. Like, how can a child survive that attack? And what was the need? A small body of a child. This officer who shot this child, you really should be put on firing squad. A small body of a child. Nobody can fail to distinguish a 12-year-old from youth. If it was one bullet, you would say it was stray, but why should it be live? So in a normal protest situation in a democratic country, this should have been rubber bullets. Yeah. Then for a child, it should have been one rubber bullet, and then you realize your mistake, that this is a smaller child. 8 live bullets. And then the president is asking, I hope he's alive. I watched that interview and I was like, but was President Ruto serious? So as a commander-in-chief of the security forces, he should be accountable to the 41 deaths. He should be accountable to the 32 abductions. On injuries, if his security forces were using live rubber bullets, yes, you can say there are minor injuries here and there. But why are the security using live bullets on Gen Zs? And we should be held accountable. In his interviews, he has insisted that the police is independent. And as if he has no role because he decentralized the financing. He has always, when I came to office, the first instrument I gave was for the police to be in charge of their funds. Does that remove his duty as a president and commander-in-chief? His duty is not just money. So if you are in command of a country as a president, how do you claim that the conduct of security forces has nothing to do with you? So I think he has largely failed on that. On the demands of the people, even as we discussed now, there was a cabinet sitting, emergency cabinet sitting to see how to handle the arrests. But as his cabinet sits, there are 2 demands, including the clergy, the religious leaders. I have just seen a statement of Muslim leaders as well. They are demanding that Ruto reduces the size of his cabinet, but also replaces the cabinet, like sends everybody home and picks a new team. And if it hasn't occurred to him that the people have pushed a vote of no confidence in his administration so far after 2 years, then maybe somebody needs to wake him up. In addition, just as I conclude, when Dr. Ojambo was talking about the offices of the First Lady and the Second Lady, and I think there was an attempt also to create an office for the Third Lady, the one of the Cabinet Secretary, the office that the Gen Zs are saying is unconstitutional because there is no provision for it. But there was an attempt to push. So it reminded me of the days of the late Mwai Kibaki, when his wife was getting out of the line. And the slogan then by Kenyans reminding the wife that they did not elect her. They were reminding her that politics is not sexually transmitted. Meaning that sleeping with an elected leader does not give you automatic privilege and access to taxpayers' money. So today the Gen Zs broke down the office of the First Lady. She has 285 staff. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
The pastor.
No, Ruto is a pastor, Rachel.
The wife, yeah.
Okay, 285 staff. If that is true, then it's quite shocking.
Well, thank you. Honorable Chairman, one of the things President Ruto spoke to in that interview that Dr. Sarah mentioned was that everyone, media houses and the public, are focusing on the 41 killed, the 360 injured and so on, but no one is mentioning that criminals entered Parliament and burnt a section of it. Some businesses were lost. He talks about he has personal friends who lost property in an interview. Is this a worthy response from a president who is addressing a crisis?
No, I think I told this program last week that I was in pain then and I'm in pain today. After the first response on the day of the massacre, Ruto went fighting in the evening with a statement in which he declared and called my fellow Africans in Kenya criminals. That was extraordinary. Thankfully, I think the blood of the dying Kenyans taunted him overnight. Common sense must have prevailed somehow. I know he's got some terrible advisors in this region. But I also know that because of the leadership provided by President Kenyatta, and I'm sure other leaders, including opposition leaders, I'm sure like the Railas, at least those guys talk, I'm sure. By later in the afternoon, Ruto the statesman emerged, and he was now talking to fellow Kenyans. It was not satisfactory, and I know even when that program found me on a global television network discussing this, and so it was a live thing, and some other Kenyans were thinking that was not enough. But for me, I gave it to him that it was a different Ruto of the previous night. Sort of almost taking responsibility, talking about, we will talk, we've listened, and people have died. But shockingly, then days later, the roundtable discussion that colleagues are talking about here. First, I get suitably impressed by the quality of the fourth media journalists, fourth estate journalists, the manner in which they handled the interview. These were genuine fourth estate representatives. They're critical, they're robust. I prayed that, I wish, and I hope, Philip, that you in the next few years, you grow, and may you grow to reach that stature. And may you grow to reach that level in which you plus others can have the capacity, the confidence, in the context, and the ability and opportunity to critique and investigate and subject a president, holding them to account in the manner in which those journalists did. But like Sarah said, that was one of the most extraordinary things, referring to the question of that child. Was it about preparedness? One of my colleagues elsewhere, watching elsewhere, ironically from Europe, this thing was followed massively, said that maybe Ruto was sufficiently briefed. Someone else said that maybe he found himself surrounded by 3 journalists. But Ruto has been in this thing. He's Moi's boy. They're used to breaking people's necks and things like that. So it was not new. I think this is the guy who was genuinely rattled, but coming from the crowd of people who are quite completely lost from an alleged hustler somewhere in Kenya Highlands to a privilege of State House. He completely lost it at that stage. Now, I am just worried that for Kenya, to reach that stage, and for us a week later to be subjected to the sense of arrogance that Mr. Museveni has manifested in the National Assembly, and for Ugandan legislators to cow down and kneel and say, yes, sir. I ask, where are the average Ugandan youth? Where are the average Ugandan citizens? When young Kenyans are continuing to push for what that is rightly belonging to theirs. The third position, the third position is actually apparently, I think, Chief Administrative Secretary, maybe mini prime ministerial position equivalent.
Yeah.
And these guys
The cabinet
say, no, it's
secretary.
not necessary.
Yeah.
Quite impressive, too. That's one of the things that I pick from these youngsters who are allegedly leaderless, regardless, they're actually quite smart. They went ahead and argued, fiscal discipline, teaching Kenyan government, Kenyan authority, how to manage and providing alternatives to this. It need not reach where it has reached. Now, whatever happens today, if Kenya was the place that I wanted, of course, that's a far fetch from Uganda. The normal thing that will really happen, away from what these youngsters are asking for Ruto to resign. Of course, Ruto looks at, I was elected with a mandate, the way Comrade Awich will talk about how Museveni was allegedly elected. Of course, Museveni wasn't elected, as in the fair as we thought. Elected, to make sure that he pumps Parliament. What really would be needed? Maybe I'm jumping ship.
Snap election.
Possibly snap elections, and I don't know what the Constitution provides for. But do you know genuinely, Ruto should actually come out and simply say that, look, fellow Kenyans, this is a shocking thing, it's a strange thing, this is a new situation. Maybe, perhaps, let's have an open emergency national dialogue, possibly have a government of national unity and have a transitional government to take us over the next 2 years. But whatever the case, there's need for such a major debate. Because I know where Kenya is, they're so privileged.
His friend would call him a coward without a vision.
I think his friend would possibly invade. His friend would invade, and then there would be a coup in Kenya. But if they did that, if Ruto was supposed to consider the amount of money and privilege they have,
to guess who the friend is.
Kenya would be in a new stage in which we would say democracy has sort of arrived in that country.
Thank you so much. Major Awich, what contribution is the government of Uganda having in terms of resolving the challenges in the neighborhood, but also are you people trying to learn a thing or two in managing the situation the way the Kenyan government is doing it?
Two questions. How well we are learning something, and the other first question was whether we are doing something, the Kenyans. First of all, the Congress says that he wishes you to grow to the stage of those eloquent journalists. Me, I'm saying you have already grown.
He's a good man. That's good for
you
a
have already grown. The decorum you handle this situation here, I just see even those who handle this is as the NBS called what? The front line. They are babies to you. So where will it grow to? It's already matured. It's good enough.
To that space. So
anyway, there's unlimited point of growth. But to me, you are good enough. The other thing is that I want to mention also that maybe a prophet is not known in his own home city. The good constitution of Kenya was written by Professor Kanyahamba. Kanyahamba, you may not know him here. In Kenya, he's known as a brain and a good guy. He's the one who wrote the Kenyan constitution. Kanyahamba.
But it's you guys who undermine him.
Kanyahamba and who? Sempewo. This Kenyan constitution is written by Ugandans. So prophets are not known in his hometown. Even Jesus.
Why don't they write for us?
Even Jesus.
But Sempewa wrote a minority report. Do we respect
Jesus,
him here?
Even Jesus.
He was reduced
Bethlehem,
to minority.
where he was born and grew up. People, when he said he was the son of God, they said, but isn't this the son of Joseph? I even see him carrying his father's timber where they...
Exactly.
Where they
I'm happy that Awich has told the truth of how we treat our big brains in the country.
So,
under NRM.
So even Jesus, but this is generally a thing, a prophet is not believed in his own hometown. I can assure you, even me, the way you treat me here is not the way I'm treated at home. Just see, some Awich, and that's why I've lost the election anyway. So it's a general trend that prophets are not born at home. Not known at home. Because they associate you to the Philips, they know. The Jesus, the son of Joseph, they even work at that corner in their timber place. I see them. Joseph was a timber carpenter. So Jesus was always carrying the timber and Joseph is cutting. You said you're a son of God. Are you crazy? So the good constitution in Kenya is written by Ugandans, and Ugandans. I've met Kenyan intellectuals, Kenyan professors, Kenyan human rights. They really respect them. So I just wanted to bring that out. Now, about the first question, definitely there are many ways that we could intervene with Kenya or support each other. We can support Kenya institutionally through the framework of East African Community. Not as Uganda per se, but through an institution of East African Community to know if such an occurrence happens in a member state, what happens. So that can be explored, but I don't know to what extent the East African Community is seeing the events in Kenya. So that is one window which we can do.
Is it there? Has it even said anything?
The other window is
But
that
it's under the leadership of
colleagues,
Salva Kiir, what do you expect?
as friends, Museveni, at his personal level as friends, he has a right to talk to his friend if consulted, or he can offer his opinion. So as colleagues, just like you can ask me. So those are the two main windows.
But if you don't mind, has he offered condolences on the death of the people of Kenya?
I'm not aware. Because for him to offer also, it needs to be brought by a competent body in Kenya. Because at this stage, I'm told you're quoting Human Rights Commission, but for the sovereignty of two countries, it needs to be brought at a competent level, possibly if his colleague tells him that,
So
brother,
you are
I've
saying
lost
that
these people. So it's a process. So, but I'm not aware if he has done it. Now, so that was the only opportunities that we can help. So through the two windows, or maybe the third window through UN or African Union at institutional level as a country. But bilaterally, we can talk, we can advise, but Kenya maintain their sovereignty. And I don't think Museveni is interested into meddling into the internal affairs of Kenya. I've seen in the social media posting somebody that is a commando, a jock from Nkajansi, they quote his number, that he was deployed there, alleging that there's a commando unit from SFC which was deployed, but I don't think that is true. Because we respect the sovereignty of Kenya, we wish them well, and we know that Kenyans are capable of resolving their issues, and they will. So there's no need for Uganda or Museveni intermeddling in the affairs of Kenya. Your other question was the relations that we draw. The relations that we draw are varied. First of all, even the relations Ugandans can draw, because quite often time, Kenya used to be a mirror by which Uganda would be judged. And we used to think they are good, they are perfect, they are better, everything is okay, until hell was let loose. So Ugandans may be thinking, after all, we are not the worst. You look for elements like the First Lady office, 285, quoting Sarah, 285, can you really get such a thing in Uganda? Like, where is First
I
Lady
knew that
office?
would come from Awich.
Where is First Lady office?
But the president has over 1,000.
We're talking...
Yeah.
So maybe 400 is for the First Lady.
A, we don't talk of B. We're talking of A, now you want to bring B. So Ugandans are also learning that there is such a thing in Kenya like a First Lady office of 285, and all we know with our humble Janet of
I don't know whether it's true, like I submitted.
Yeah, I heard from you. Unless you want to...
Yeah, but for me, I'm saying, out of 1,000 and so, maybe 400 are for the First Lady.
That is what I've already answered. We are discussing, you are bringing B. So we are discussing the First Lady, not the President. Maybe if you went to President Ruto's office, it would also shock you in thousands. But we have left that. And therefore, if we have left President Ruto's office,
they are the same.
Let also leave the President. We were discussing the First Lady.
The man has
and in any case, I'm
nurses.
responding. So Ugandans are seeing that after all, we were not the worst. Secondly, is that we learned that, and I've kept saying here, that the consciousness of the people, which it can lead to a riot, is not a consciousness brought from heaven. A man has senses, the sense of sight, the sense of a tongue, a sense of a hear, a sense of a pain. we feel reality and it develops into our consciousness. So the materiality, the nature of the economy is what matters. For example, in the cost of living in Kenya had grown. I'm quoting my friend Dombo, he packaged it so well. The nature of the cost of living in Kenya is so high. Why? Because the nature of economy in Kenya is such that there are few capitalist producers. And it is those capitalist producers which protect their interests. For example, you cut off milk from Kenya. You cut off eggs from Kenya. I mean, from Uganda. Eggs, milk, chicken, or whatever. And therefore keeping the prices there high. A similar situation had arisen in Uganda, where Tanzanians were bringing their rice. Some people thought we would stop Tanzanian rice. Museveni said, why not? If they are selling and you are selling, why do you fear? Tanzanian rice was allowed, the price of rice went down. And like if you are trying to shield of Tanzanian rice in protecting yours, in the end it is the local people. You know that even during Corona, even during all circumstances, the liberal nature of our economy, where we even promote individual small-scale production, is that we shall always have food. And we have not even barred Kenyan food from coming. And that has settled the market. So, the consciousness of the people to decide to go rioting or not depends on, so their feeling. So when the people are feeling well, even if you lure them on the street, they will say, like in Uganda, Kanjije or Kankomeo, it will not come back. It will leave you to go on the street alone. And that is why some leaders in Uganda, like Besigye, he thinks that Ugandans are very bad or very stupid.
Again,
I have urged them to go on the street. They don't want to go. Why? People have said, they have set benchmark, meaning that they'll chase the president without a constitutional means. Some leaders have been put to task. You told us you are going to remove him. Why haven't you removed him? Thinking that you remove using the people. But I can tell you the conscience, the people are not, the consciousness of the people is in their needs, what they feel. So you'll tell them, they know the materiality. You'll tell them to go on the street, they'll tell you, Kanjije, Kankomeo, you will go alone. Now for them not to go and not to join you, it's their the nature of the economy. We have tried our best and we shall try to do that through those small interventions that intellectuals downplay. Parish development model. Put 100 million in the parish. Okay? Put 100 million in the parish. People grow their beans. Their sim, their what? Those small intervention, we want them produce. For you, you are here in your intellectualism and saying, Omusaja again, you are going to take the people and remove the man. Sooner or later, you are asked that, why haven't you removed? Because the consciousness of the people is felt by how the government organizes the status quo, how his rights, how his needs are met. And therefore, you tell him to go to the street, you tell you can come.
But Lobo is also a need. Lobo Hospital is a need.
Small information before we come out. You know, there's a poor reading of Kenyan economy by, he has just quoted Dombo. So last time I went and checked the Kenyan economy because they were saying, you see, Kenya imports food from Uganda, maize and what have you.
They block, they don't import, they block.
Kenya. I come from a neighborhood of Kenya in Busia. That's my village. And Kenya and Uganda, what is imported from which country depends on the season. In fact, for information, Kenya produces more maize than Uganda, ×3 if you look at how much maize Kenya produces.
And how much they consume?
Uganda. Only that for them
and how much they consume?
So there are months. In fact, my real brother trades in maize at the border at Busia. There are months when the maize is being imported from Uganda, and the next 3 months it is imported from Kenya to Uganda. So it is not true that the Kenyan economy, people are eating from the shop. In fact, our economies are identical because for me, my mother, the mother is a Kenyan, comes from a village called Nambale. I have lived there, I have been there, they are my grandfathers. When you are there, you are just like somebody who is in Soga. They also farm, they live like any other person. The only difference is that Kenya there are more people in urban area than in Uganda. More people, especially young people, live in urban area, and that may be true to what he's saying. The issue in Uganda and a cause of a revolution is normally by conscience, it's not by feeling, as he says. Majority of Ugandans are still subconscious, so much so that even things that affect them, they don't know. I can tell you, if you went out there and carried out a survey in Ntinda here,
which is one of the most affluent parts of Kampala, somebody to tell you the purpose of a budget, they say Sivimanyi.
Wow.
Plus fear.
Thank you. Dr. Sarah, how does Kenya resolve this whole issue and come back to peace and normalcy?
The Kenyan businesses along streets have closed for almost 2 weeks. Kenya is the economic giant of the region. I don't know how much money, I will ask Ojambo to check for me, how much money, how much loss they are making per day.
It's a lot. I need to check.
A lot of money for such a big economy. So, if Ruto's problem is paying debt, and he pays debt through taxpayers' money or people's money, because borrowing to pay debt will only push the country back into a deeper debt crisis than they are in. The Gen Zs are telling him, and even said it in that roundtable interview, that he's going to cut his coat according to the size of his growth. So he has been meeting his cabinet. It's not that he has a big cabinet like Uganda. They don't. But even that smaller cabinet, the people are asking that it be trimmed down. They pay for parliament, people are asking that the allowances be taken away, and they just retain their salaries and serve the country. So for Kenya, or for any leader for that matter being in Ruto's shoes, the first thing that that leader should do is climb down from his high horse and reason with the Gen Zs. Even the Bible, God says, come we reason together, putting dialogue ahead of every process. I know he announced dialogue with 100 people, but who gets on that table to discuss for 50 million also is questionable. But the Gen Zs, for them, they were clear. They need him on social media dialogue. So he offered that this evening, Thursday, will be on social media with the Gen Zs. Some are saying don't come, others are saying come. So it remains to be seen how that space will go. I'm sure many people from all over the world will log on to that space to see how the dialogue between Ruto and the Gen Zs goes on.
Who is the admin of the forum?
No, we are yet to see. That aside, there is a need for deeper dialogue in the country. Deeper dialogue, as much as Kenya has had a culture of protests and uprisings, right from Moi, the Sabasaba, when the clashes of Mzee Jaramoja and Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and up to the post-election violence in 2007, Mandamo after the elections, led by Raila Odinga. This is a new generation. So there is need for new consensus. All the clergy, all the parents of the Gen Zs were clear. They were supporting them. Even when people say it's not just the Gen Zs, you have Generation X and the others.
Millennium.
Yes. Yeah, the others joined in support of Gen Zs. But this is a struggle of Gen Zs, and you cannot take it away from them. Others joined in solidarity. And all the professional associations, we interacted when I was in Nairobi with the Female Lawyers Association, the civil society, the clergy have been on record for helping the Gen Zs have their say in how they wish to be governed. So the only way forward for Ruto, as much as he might not call a snap election like it's common in Europe, he needs to have a genuine dialogue with the people, build new consensus, and govern according to that consensus. Because there is, calling dialogue just to calm down the tempers in a country, and we are not genuine and committed. But this time, he has got to commit to the new consensus of the people.
Thank you so much. Honorable Chairman, some people have described President Ruto as a weak president. Is President Ruto weak?
He's clearly been weakened by the
circumstances.
And by the exposure of the protests. Like I think, was it Dr. Ojambo who was considering Ruto as that very robust, articulate, and very confident guy. But he has been exposed like anybody else that when he faces real fire, he rattles, and indeed rattled in that interview. But it's also not about that interview. I said his first reaction was completely unstatesmanly. It was basically, he thought that, well, here is some Kalenjin guy who's going hunting, and has been faced by squares of lions rather than a statesman in State House in Nairobi, and that was quite shocking. That alone, by actually early part of last year, when the cost of living demonstrations were taking place across Kenya, it was very clearly the case that the Ruto that swept in force into power just hardly 2 years ago was no longer the Ruto that Kenyans saw, because Ruto quite clearly, ran on the basis of a series of lies, including the idea that he was necessarily a hustler when he really clearly wasn't. But of course, it caught up with the Kenyan people, and to be fair to him, some people bought into it, although it's also fairly the case that we know that his elections were contested. Clearly, notwithstanding that, he got a sizable following of the young people. So that is no longer the Ruto that was leading to 2 weeks ago. The political thing, and that's one of the reasons why the Musevenis don't fall into that league. And of course, yes, you're the excellent anchor here, the excellent moderator. But in Uganda, we want to pray for you to have an opportunity to have a space in which you're able to join two others and go and sit with Mr. Museveni in a manner in which Ruto sat with the journalists. Because that is unforeseeable in Uganda. That's one of the reasons. That was part of my prayer. So now that we've all qualified, backed by Comrade Awich, no less that you meet that criteria, you need to be able to reach that stage. So, being Kenya, and Kenya being what it is, coming to a normalized nation state as we would normally expect, a relatively open nation state as we would expect, for you to, as a leader, to say one thing today and say something else the following morning, that in itself weakens you, because the integrity is questioned, brought to question, credibility brought into question, and that's something actually with nuances politically, which from some of the global perspective, if I look at some of the UK elections that I was looking at the other week, and of course now we know what's happened in UK, but we will talk about it another time. In public opinion, will look at how you carry yourself, and in as long as you give yourself a slight issue of an opportunity that you're contradicting yourself and you don't have a command, you get weakened. But you get weakened in public opinion. But fair enough, in politics, that can change. Ruto can do a few other things, including going to kneel down for the families of the dead and seek compensation, and then claim that is now been saved for the 5th time. Maybe it can change. The thing is, what happens beyond that? And the thing, like Sarah says, I actually generally don't know what is likely to happen. Short of possibly calling for a national conference, I don't see how it will turn around. I see from social media and from some friends again in Kenya that possibly in the event that this thing continues with the next elections, it will be very difficult for him to pull it off, especially the fact that now all of a sudden he's at loggerheads with his deputy president, something that I never saw coming. So that to me is actually an extraordinary thing that we hadn't discussed.
If I may share briefly on the economic disruption. So the estimate is at 3 billion Kenya shillings. And this is a lot of money. It's about 21.
How much Uganda shillings?
No, it's about $21 million. And these losses are due to halted business activities, transport disruptions, and then the cost the police is using, the security is using to contain the protesters. For the record, I left Kenya Thursday last week. For the first time, there were very few people at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Fewer than during COVID when we had the travel disruptions.
Wow. Major Awich, finally, do we admire Kenya as a state?
Finally, meaning I want to come back here. I mean, this is my last say.
Yeah, we have.
For the show.
Parting shot?
For the show.
Okay, because I wanted to
Me, I've
share
not
something.
even, me, I've not even had a parting shot, but I'm okay.
But you will have. So, if this is a parting shot, why I was asking, because I wanted to share something that I will come to what is your question? What do I admire? Do I admire the state of Kenya? Is that your question?
Should we admire Kenya?
The conduct, the way it handles the situation.
Okay, but first, why I was asking whether this was a parting shot was because I wanted to share something before we close out the show. I was with Sarah the day before yesterday in some meeting in Hotel Africana, and the findings of Afrobarometer was so nice. I wanted to share two things. One, Afrobarometer, where Sarah was, found that violence in Uganda, political violence, is perpetuated by opposition. And I'd always said that here, and you people had refused. Now an independent researcher did.
Is it independent?
I have always said, I told somebody of NBS that if you think NRM is the perpetuator, give me your T-shirt of NUP, give me your coffee of NUP. I give you my T-shirt of NRM, and I give you my coffee of NRM. You wear it, I wear yours. We walk in one together.
Yeah, but
I said yes.
But that is citizens' agitation. That is anger.
If you think you are attacking one again because you're a majority, you only get to know that NRM is silent majority after you attack and people come to ask you why. Okay? So, even if you were the majority, it does not justify you to attack a minority. That is one. Two, the other finding was that 44% of Ugandans don't associate with any political party. And that is absurd. However, 42% associate with NRM, meaning the other 16%, the 14% are shared with opposition. This was an independent study. That is what I want to share. Now, back to the state of Kenya. Back to the state of Kenya. So you can see how we are doing very well. Now, back to the state of Kenya is that a state is supposed to be the cohesive arm of the society. A state is a cohesive arm of this society. But a state can only come to enforce a popular position. In other words, the people must agree, then the state implements. If the state implements an unpopular position, it breaks. For example, if we have an environment issue, and everybody agree that please, let's protect the environment, that's why you find the eviction go on, because even the people said, but you, Kello, why are you in the wetland also? So you are not only state to emphasize the cohesive element, but the state is supposed to enforce a popular position of the people. And that's why it is an arm of the people. It's a state, it's a cohesive. So how the Kenyan state is handling theirs, we are yet to watch, because it is, I think, premature to judge what extent they have gone.
Thank you so much for that view, and thank you so much for making it to the Citizens Chat show today. Honorable Channel, thank you so much for your views and for being here today. Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for your views and for joining us today. And Dr. Ojambo, thank you so much for your views and for joining the Citizens Chat show. And to you, the viewers, thank you so much for keeping it the Citizens Chat show and Civic Space TV. Special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance. A lot of work going on down there to make sure this is prosperous. Special thanks to the people behind the machines. We appreciate the work you do from us. We say good evening and you have freedom always.